everybody. David Kennedy, Canopy Realtor Association MLS president, here with another ordinary realtor who did some extraordinary things. Tommy, how are we doing?
Doing great. How about yourself, Dave?
I'm doing just fine. Fine. So when we read the history of the association, it has the name Lawing throughout. Tell me, when did you get into real estate? What year was it?
I got into real estate in 1971. Okay. This is 50 years.
What was real estate like in 71 when you broke into business?
Much slower.
Okay.
No internet.
All right.
Okay. No internet. Everything was printed.
So
slower.
When you get in 71, for a frame of reference for the folks that don't know, when you introduce yourself, you are Tommy Lawing Jr., which means there must have been a Tommy Lawing Sr. Now, when we read the history books, he's president in 1965, realtor of the year in 67. He was in the midst of the civil rights movement and its effect on the real estate industry. Did he ever share some of the things he went through as president with you guys as you were growing up?
My memory of that time has to do with mostly appraising and urban renewal, if you will, urban renewal in the center of Charlotte. I come into the business in 71, so most of it has passed by then. So no, I don't remember a lot of discussion with Dad on civil rights.
Did he take you are introduced in 71 into the business, and is it a burden to be the son of Tommy Lawing Sr. or Tierra Lawing? Are there benefits associated? I mean, it seems like there's expectations placed upon you day one. How was that?
Sure, there's certainly expectations. I'm lucky. When I came out of high school, I planned to be a realtor. I took my college education that way. I came into the business in 71 that way. So I knew what I was getting into pretty much as far as real estate. I was second generation realtor and property manager. So I've kind of lived with that all my life. That's not a problem.
So when you break in the business at 71, how long before you are drawn to serve in your own capacity here at the association and with local leadership and involvement in the committees?
Good question. At the time, there was a property management bureau that was run by the Charlotte Board of Realtors. And I became active in it probably less than 3 or 4 years into it. It's a small group of property managers. And so I was active at the local association before I'd been in the business 5 years, because I was able to come in as a property manager, as an officer of PMD, the Property Management Division at that point.
So what, from my recollection, you served as treasurer prior to being president. So what year were you treasurer?
I would have been president in 93, and so I was treasurer for 3 years before that, 92, 91, 90.
All right. So when we look back on some of the things that you were covering during those years, one of the things that stands out is regionalization.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw some large real estate firms opening up businesses in outlying counties. And from what we read, you were pretty influential in keeping up with everyone and communicating with them and understanding there's going to be an impact with firms with offices outside of Charlotte, outside of Mecklenburg County. What were you seeing then that kind of helped get us through that time?
I was lucky. I served under at least 2 presidents that were very interested in regionalization, Jody Harpootlian and Catherine Barnhart. I was treasurer under Jody, and I remember her challenging me to simply go out and meet some of the officers in the other boards. At that time, we did not know the first name, and we would not have recognized the president, probably of Union County, Cabarrus County, or Iredell County. It was pretty much just Mecklenburg, Charlotte, Mecklenburg. And so I was able to go out and have lunch one-on-one, a sandwich and a handshake, as we called it, at these other associations and get to know them. I really enjoyed it. We started trying to find things we could work on, particularly at that time, professional standards training. The small boards were having a hard time putting it on. Charlotte was not having any problem at all. So we started to partner on that. Education became part of it.
So did those associations you were meeting with, did they have their own individual MLS at the time? So did the discussions, a sandwich and a handshake, they talk about primarily education, but they ever linger into MLS?
We didn't at the time. This is all introductory level, if you will. This is honestly getting to know somebody on a first name basis and having lunch with them. It was the first step in regionalization, if you will. We believed that if we knew our neighbors well, then when they needed us, they would come to us. And that's exactly what happened with Iredell County.
All right. And how did that, when did they come, do you remember?
Iredell comes, I don't remember the year, but Iredell County is one of those boards that starts to recycle officers. And when the same guy is president twice in a 5-year period, they said, hey, we could use a larger association. They come to Charlotte and ask us for services. We knew who they were. They knew us.
All right. So in your year as president in 1993, the association moves to 1201 Greenwood Cliff. We came from Moorhead to
Sure
Greenwood Cliff. What's your recollection of the movement from our office there on Moorhead Street to here?
The 1201 Greenwood Cliff had been vacant for a couple of years, probably. I remember going through it. We took a lot of pictures. We had full membership meetings to discuss it. We had a really sweet offer from the hospital that wanted our site on Moorhead to come over here. It was a big leap for us. We didn't need a building 4 stories tall, but everybody agreed it was the right thing to do. Thank goodness, that's how we ended up with the site that we're now on.
So legend has it from good authority that in a helicopter you built yourself, you flew it around the site, and your brother Bob would take pictures of the building to kind of help with the decision-making process. Do you remember flying around the site in your helicopter with your brother Bob?
This is before I had a helicopter. I was a fixed-wing pilot. I flew Cessna and Piper for 15 years or so. So the story is pretty much accurate. Bob and I came up on a Sunday afternoon, flew over the site, took pictures of the building from the air to be able to share with the membership at later dates. I did build a helicopter years later, but that's not the same flight.
Sorry, we get
It's okay, you're close.
All right. So there's also, during your year, we move into Greenwood Cliff office, but I believe there's some MLS expansion. Did we expand our MLS at all? And if we did, to the extent, what was the extent that we did?
I don't remember much of the expansion of the MLS. I do remember going into Iredell County.
Okay.
That part we came into, and then we start offering partnerships with probably Cabarrus or Union, some of our nearby neighbors at the time. But you start having firms, you mentioned large firms, you start having firms that have their listings in 2 or more MLSs. And some of the large firms eventually would say, I'm tired of paying dues at 2 or 3 MLSs. We've got to pick one. And thank goodness they often picked the Carolinas MLS at the time. And they would only put their listings in our MLS, and that pretty much closed the door at that point.
So we moved to Greenwood Cliff, a new building. We're expanding our MLS. I'm also reading that in 1993 we purchased the Mingle School of Real Estate.
We do.
What kind of went into that purchase? Did it make sense? Was Vane Mingle kind of retiring? Was it at that point? Was it natural? Okay.
Vane is retiring at that point. He and his wife, I believe, have run the school for however many years it has been here. There's some discussion among the realtors of, do we really want to get into education? There's some pushback or resistance, but we decided to make that move. If I'm not mistaken, that is prior to required continuing ed. So we're still doing pre-licensing and some other courses like that, professional standards, that type of thing. But it was the right thing to do, and it got us into the education field much faster than a startup would have done.
So you, as president, you continue on, and there was to serve, even beyond your presidential year. Talk to us, if you have the recollection. There's a commercial listing exchange. Describe the interrelationship with that and the MLS, and how it seemed to divide and be its own.
Up until probably the mid-90s, early 90s, there were commercial properties inside our MLS. It was the only place that the commercial realtor had to market them if they wanted to. And at about that time, the National Association of Realtors creates the commercial overlay boards. And we support that. I mean, basically, as residential realtors, we're fine with the commercial realtors having their own listing exchange and their own board. And so it was pretty much supported by what's now Canopy for the CB, CBR, whatever, to be able to spin off at that point. I think they covered 18 counties when it started. We were like third or fourth in the nation.
So it's almost a chicken and egg question here. What came first? After we kind of split the CLE and MLS, is that when all of a sudden commercial realtors had their own separate level of education and designations? Did that kind of help start that?
They do. They've had probably MAIs, they've had CCIMs, CPMs at that point in the game, but they really haven't had their own association. If I'm not mistaken, while the property managers had a seat on the board, so did the commercial realtors at the time. They were a small group. The CLE, the Commercial Listing Exchange, would have had its own seat. But they didn't have much of a voice. Neither did the property managers from that standpoint, but they're just a small part, a specialty area inside. So they're glad to spin it off.
So now that the Commercial Listing Exchange is separated from the MLS, there is a point in time where, as leaders, we're looking at the MLS and realize there hasn't been a tremendous amount of governance since 1976. Mm-hmm. And the president at the time, Mike Rash, he believes, hey, we've got to start looking at this. And of all the people to have a task force to do the governance for the MLS, he tags Tommy Long Jr. And you get, can you remember who was on your task force? It said 10 or 11 past presidents.
They were all past presidents, if I'm not mistaken. Ann Little would have been on there, I do believe. And Bill Lackey, I know, was on there. Bill was very effective and very helpful on there. I honestly don't remember the rest of the group. But you're right, we were working on changing the governance of the MLS.
So here's the quote. Your leadership is described as straightforward with no hidden differences. So straightforward, no hidden differences, just honest differences. How did you bring a group of people together to be as honest about some of the differences of opinions when many times people can conceal some of their feelings just for advantages in negotiations?
They talk about it as the elephant in the room. We didn't have an elephant in the room because we talked about the elephant in the room. Prior to the change you're talking about, only the MPs, the member participants, had a vote. They elected all of the officers, they made all the policies, and they were a small group because basically they're your bigs. And so the rank and file realtor out there doesn't have a vote in the MLS except through his member participant. And we've talked about that a lot and said this probably isn't the best model going forward. We're losing a lot of, or passing over a lot of good volunteers, if nothing else. And so I remember the vote at the Grady Cole Center when we brought it up and everybody was there, and it was substantial that the member participants at the time said, yes, we give up our right. We want the same right as the subscribers do. And it passed, and we changed our model.
So when you look back, obviously from here you go on to serve as state president, and you've had your nephew, Joe, he at TR Long Realty, he's followed you through. Good. What does it mean to you to look back on your career? What are some of the things that you're proud of when you look back after 50 years? That's half the age of the entire association itself. You've been involved. So when you look back, what are you proud of?
I'm proud to say that the realtors have a seat at the table at this point in the game, and I don't say that lightly. I can remember doing a strategic planning session here at the local association, and we hired a consultant to go out and ask the question, what groups in Charlotte have 2,000 members? And no one mentioned the realtors. They mentioned the large churches, they mentioned a lot of other groups, but they didn't mention us. And we didn't really have a seat at the table in the political arena at that point in the game. We weren't taken, we didn't have much respect, I guess, from local leaders, from politicians, that type of thing, and we felt like we needed to. We needed to be at the table. We're at the table now.
So there's the Real Estate Building Industry Coalition, which is Rebic. Mm-hmm. And was there ever a time when, something that you're really proud of, was there ever a time where folks didn't see the importance and you had to really lift it up and say, this is paramount?
John Crosland and Alan Tate get the credit for Rebic. They had started it, they had funded it for many, many, many years. And at some point, both of those gentlemen say it's time for the organizations, basically the home builders and the realtors, to take it over. And we'd been getting a pretty easy ride at that point in the game, and to come up with, I think, something like $75,000 each at the time to help fund Rebic and its staff was a pretty good chunk of change, if you don't mind. So there was resistance to it, but it was what needed to happen because Rebic gave us a paid government affairs officer at a city council or a county commissioners meeting, at a committee meeting where a lot of the decisions were being made, just as the state association was doing in Raleigh. But we weren't doing it at the local level. So we needed Rebic, and we needed the home builders with us because we agreed on so many things. We do disagree on a couple, but we agreed on probably 90% of the items. And so there was no sense in not working together.
So to extend that, the Realtor Political Action Committee, you're in the what we call RPAC, you're in the Hall of Fame. So what does that mean to get into the Hall of Fame? How did you get there? What's the importance? What's the reason why you invest? You're also in the President's Circle.
Yeah,
all of that
good stuff. It's anybody can be in the Hall of Fame. Anyone can be in the President's Circle that will stroke the check. Okay, that's how easy it is to get in. Okay, don't let anybody fool you that it's not. But why is it important? I think it was coming up through the local Charlotte Realtor Association that I started to appreciate how many things in life, how many of the decisions that affect realtors were being made at the governmental level. And we needed to be talking to these elected leaders, and we needed to be able to call them and voice our opinion. And the only way you were going to do that was to support them in an election somewhere. They were going to remember us that way. They were going to take our call. They don't always agree with us. We never expected them to. But I felt like we needed to be at the table whenever sidewalks were being discussed or trees were being discussed or that type of thing. And RPAC is the way to do that.
So kind of switching speeds a little bit from the political arena to the foundation, our charitable arm. And some of the contributions you've had over the years, the one thing that speaks to us now, the present generation, is the Pearl Society. And so as there are different tiers for the Pearl Society, for founders of the Pearl Society. So at the highest tier, there is T.R. Lawing, Tommy Lawing Jr., and Joe Remsen. So your 3 generations of commitment to our foundation. Tell us why the foundation is so important to you and your family.
The Housing Foundation's been around for a long time, and it's had a rocky road, kind of like Rebic had from time to time. There have been those that would have voted it out or taken it out. I think community service is a big part of being a realtor, always have. Most of us were already active in our church, our scout troop, our homeowner association, our little league, or somewhere else. So this was able to do it under the umbrella of the Realtor Association, and rightly so. And so I'm proud to be part of the Pearl Society. I'm pleased with what the Housing Foundation does.
So many presidents at times, after their presidential year is over, they'll have a past president year, and then they kind of go back and concentrate on their business. You continued on as state president, and you remain active there. What's the inspiration what's the reasoning behind just to continue at that state level in terms of leadership and service?
Some of it is greedy. I will admit to that. I get a lot more out of the association than they get out of me. I learn a lot about what's going on in my community, my business, the world around us, simply by being active in the local trade association or the state association. And so I've always had a big benefit from being active in the Realtor Association at any different level, any of the levels.
So this year marks 11 years on the Real Estate Commission?
Correct.
Correct. What has it been like? Describe to us your time as a commissioner on the Real Estate Commission.
I enjoy that service, no question about that, and I'm very appreciative for being there. It's basically a board of directors, and people think of it from the disciplinary standpoint. Practitioners, those of us in the field, look at the last page to see who was disciplined. That's a small part of what goes on at the Real Estate Commission or any other occupational licensing board, to be honest. There's a lot of policies, making sure that the playing field is pretty level at that point. Disciplinary, to be able to discipline those that are bad actors. There aren't many bad actors, but you do need some police force, if you will, for those that take the money illegally or mislead people or that type of situation. But I see it as a board of directors. I do enjoy being up there. It's an administrative body. Our meetings, our once a month meetings on Wednesdays is all administration and looks a lot like a board of directors at the Realtors or Rebic or anywhere else that you've been. So.
What does it mean for you to preside over a company that's been in business for 60 years? In the office to your left is the creator of Realtors Care Day, past president, past Realtor of the Year. You're running you're in a real estate commission meeting at the state via Zoom, and then the office to your right, you've got a sitting association president running board of directors meetings. When you take a break and go to lunch, could you imagine all that activity in your one office?
Never. Very blessed. Very appreciative of it at that point in the game. We've been lucky, I guess, at TR Lang Realty. A lot of our staff have been active at the local level, yourself included. I think if you were to ask, a lot of them would say the same thing. They get a lot out of doing service at the association. They enjoy the comradeship, the fellowship that goes on. They enjoy finding out new things about the industry and their business. And it's just a good feeling. It's a good group to work for. It's an honest group to work for.
So how does it feel when you have so many nonprofits, community housing providers who have difficult scenarios with which they need housing, and they daily think of TR Lang Realty? They come to you for help, and we deliver. What is that? Is that a legacy that you feel you have?
It's a legacy. It's I'm honored to be in the housing industry or so, but it is currently, it's very frustrating. It's almost sad. I see a lot of folks that apply for 2 or 3 or 4 houses. A lot of practitioners will tell you they make offers on 3, 4, 5 houses. They don't get it. That's a sad situation, if not a bad situation. I'm not sure that as property managers I can do anything about it much. I'm not a builder or a developer, and if I was, I can only build them one at a time. But I'm hoping that somebody will come up with the answer for it. I'm honored to be in the business, but I can't do much for those folks. I'm sorry.
So when you look back on your career, what are you most proud of? And if you don't say your first $1 million sale and what year, tell us what year you sold your first $1 million property.
I had been in the business 7 years before I ever sold anything.
All right.
And that year I sold a 120 unit apartment complex off of Kilburn for $1,015,000.
So
that was my first.
$1 million listing you sold in 1978.
That's correct.
Nicely done. We'll do the capital. You'll do the rate.
That would be fine. But that was it. I wasn't in it as a salesperson. I never got into real estate to do sales. We do sales at TR Lang Realty. I'm pleased to say that, but we do property management. We try to do a very good job.
All right. So after your presidency in '93, you still remain involved, and what we see in the '90s is I guess a sunsetting of the list books, and we begin to embrace internet and technology. What was it like to be in the business then?
When I got into the business in '71, we were using a printed book. When we moved to McDowell Street, we put in a basement that had 3 printers in it. We had 3 employees that were printers. We printed a book for every member of the MLS every week and delivered it, a hardbound book. So you got new listings once a week, probably on Friday. That was the pace that was going on. We slowly migrate to the computer world, and it is a slow, painful migration, if you will. None of us expected what we have now. I can remember at the time being on the board and voting to increase the number of phone lines to 120. That meant 120 members could dial in to our MLS at the same time. You had to have a different phone line and a different modem for everybody that accessed it because there was no internet. We eventually get away from the printed book. We quit printing the book. We start adopting some other technologies, and obviously we're into the internet. And now my guess is the hot sheet comes out about once an hour. instead of once a week. And people are watching it that closely.
So have you kept up with the evolution of the market stats when we first started getting them come out? What's your feeling been on that?
Oh, I'm amazed at the speed that everything happens, if nothing else. I'm amazed at the speed that the stats come out. I'm amazed at the speed that the sales take place, that they're able to close as quickly as they can. All of this was a paper-based world when I got into it.
So when we have discussions here at the association, some of the rules that we talk about with regards to what is reasonable for realtors to be able to provide in terms of information on a listing, every once in a while they'll give realtors a pass on like HOA dues and stuff like that because they say, hey, it's hard to reach a property manager. Can you talk about, and I think one of the differences between reaching a property manager and not is a web-based platform with which owners can have a portal to get the information, whatever information they need, without having to connect with a live person. And you were one of the first property managers in the business to really adopt that. Talk about what went through almost the automation of that to try to better serve the clients.
Right. We've always felt like that the customer, our client in our case, I'll put it that way, the client in our case, deserves to be able to get to the information as quickly as they can. If they want it on Saturday afternoon, they want a copy of the lease, they want their 1099 from last year, they need to be able to get to it. They don't need to wait till Monday and call somebody, what you're describing. And so the owners' portals and the tenant portals have accomplished all of that for us. It's a shame that we don't have all of the public information publicly available, such as the HOA dues or special assessments or the minutes or the CCRs or anything like that. There's not a common database for all of that, but it is coming. You can kind of feel it. I watch the banks and I see what the banks are doing. They start offering more and more information online. Credit card companies do the same thing. We're just a little further down the timeline. We'll get there.
Yeah, but to see an app for your property management software that you could put on your phone, and wherever you are, you can get that information. And for companies like TR Long really to embrace that, that's good.
It's good.
What are your kind of get some final thoughts here? What advice would you give to realtors of today? What we need to be mindful of? What you hope we can accomplish in the future going forward?
That's a tough question there, Dave. Let's think about that. Stay in your lane. I guess from my service on the Real Estate Commission, I would say that you need to stay in your lane. If you sell houses and you sell houses well, then what in the world are you doing trying to sell farmland somewhere? It doesn't make any sense, and you don't know anything about crops and agriculture. Stay in your lane. Volunteer. Get involved in some volunteer organization. If not your church and synagogue or your scout troop or your little league, then come over to the Realtor organization. We'll be glad to have you. There's plenty of places to volunteer. You'll get a lot of rewards out of it. You'll learn a lot. The neighborhood, the environment itself, the community will do well with your service. And enjoy it. That's what I've done for 50 years. I've had a blast. I'm still here because I'm enjoying every day of it. So have a good time. Real estate's a great career to be in. I chose it. I would recommend it to friends and family.